No movement at the trade deadline for your Jacksonville Jaguars. I'll tell you what that means and then get into what they need in the future. We'll do that today on Locked On Jaguars.
You are Locked On Jaguars, your daily Jacksonville Jaguars podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
It is your team every day here on Locked On Jaguars. We thank you for making us your first listen. We appreciate you all joining us. Today's episode is sponsored and brought to you by GameTime. Download the GameTime app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Listen, the trade deadline has come and gone. So let me tell you what the show is going to be about today. In segment number 3, we're going to address the team needs moving ahead for the Jacksonville Jaguars. Yep, I'm going to go ahead and start doing it already. Y'all probably know exactly where it is, but it's going to be a little bit different because I'm going to assume that they're going to move off of certain people in the offseason. What it means that the Jaguars didn't do anything. And I know when Trent Baalke made 2 trades leading up to the trade deadline, a lot of people thought, well, that means that he's securing his job. And I was like, not so fast. He was just doing his job. And now he didn't do anything else. So what does that mean? What conclusions can we draw from that? We'll start at the very top, talking about no movement at the deadline. Shout out to the everydayers for joining us here every single day. We appreciate it. And you can find us over on our YouTube page that is Locked On Jaguars, or wherever you get your podcast that you listen to or hear. Now, let's get to it. Trade deadline. I did not expect the Jaguars to be buyers with the trade deadline being today at 4 o'clock. That's why we're recording a little bit late. I did not expect them to buy or go out and trade for players, especially the kind of players that they would need for this thing to turn around. I knew they weren't going to do it. I'm wondering, though, if they could have gave up that 4th or 5th round pick from Marshawn Lattimore. But at this point, they're 2-7. Probably not smart to do unless you're going to give them a contract extension, and the Jaguars don't give contract extension during the middle of the season. So all of that stuff goes out of the window. And there aren't a whole bunch of offensive linemen moving. You notice that teams just don't trade those big guys, and the Jaguars seem to be settled into the guys that they already have. No need in trading for a receiver at this point either. So they weren't going to be buyers, but I did think that there was a chance that they could continue to be sellers. And the reason why I said the word continue is because they started that process a couple of weeks ago with first moving Roy Robinson Harris and then moving Cam Robinson. So I was sitting here wondering, okay, well, what else are they going to do? Because regardless of whether you look at it this way or not, both of those moves, by the way, could possibly have been made earlier in the year, but they weren't. And the only reason I could guess that they weren't made was, well, the team wanted to make sure that the other guys who they were going to put in their place were healthy. That's the only thing I could come up with as to why the Jaguars waited that late. It ain't like they got a whole bunch. It ain't like they held out for this great compensation when they got rid of those 2 people, right? Right. So the thing is now you're just wondering, okay, well, what's the plan? It's full steam ahead. That's what the plan is. Bring on Minnesota. They're going to play the Vikings here this weekend. That's what the plan is. The plan is they're going to go out and try to win a game that I can't imagine them winning, only if Sam Darnold throws it away. But as long as they got Brian Flores and the way that defense is playing with the Jaguars' depleted wide receiver core and offensive line that is sometimes a little bit different, and with the way that they blitz and how Trevor sometimes makes mistakes when he sees that pressure, no, I don't see them beating them, and I damn sure don't see them beating Detroit the following week. So you're looking at a team that's going to have at least 8 losses over the next 2 weeks by the time these next 2 weeks go by. One final trade that did happen, the Texans traded defensive tackle Khalil Davis to the 49ers for a 7th round pick. I'll go through some of these other trades real quick, and then it'll make you wonder why the Jaguars couldn't do something, right? Were they really interested in moving guys? I talked about Travis Etienne, and I heard people talking about Evan Ingram, and no, Jaguars didn't do any such thing. Commanders traded for Saints cornerback Marshawn Lattimore. It's like it got like a 4th and a 5th round pick with some other stuff. Steelers trade for wide receiver Mike Williams and pass rusher Preston Smith from Green Bay. The Colts said that Anthony Richardson was off limits in trades. That's interesting. The Rams sent cornerback Tre'Davious White to the Ravens. The Ravens did touch up that area. I figured they wouldn't go for a pass rusher because they did sign Yannick Ngakoue not too long ago. The Cowboys traded a 4th round pick for Jonathan Mingo, which is a bit of a head scratcher. But getting back to the Jaguars, you wonder, did the Jags have anything they could have gotten, could have gone out and somebody given them a 4th round pick for it? If you look at the names, you might think that, but then you have to look at the contract situation. You have to look at how much money a player is owed. So, yeah, it didn't surprise me that, of course, that they didn't go out and get another player, but it kind of did surprise me that we didn't hear anything else from this team in terms of trying to add more draft capital. Of course, if you add that draft capital, you'd be probably doing it for a different general manager if we all have our druthers or if we all have our wishes and dreams and hopes come true. And I don't want to speak for everybody, but I kind of am a little bit. Nothing. They like their team. And I'm being sarcastic when I say that, but it kind of just echoes what they always say. We like our team. They're doing a nice job. Doug Peterson has to be the most doing a nice job on a way. It's almost as if like they got gasoline pajamas on and they're headed towards hell, and he says everybody's doing a nice job. It's like at some point they're not doing a nice job, Doug. At some point something is wrong. If they're doing such a nice job, why ain't y'all winning more games? No movement from the Jacksonville Jaguars. No movement from Trent Baalke. I don't know or have any information if anybody called them. They seem to always have a policy where they answer the phone for just about anybody, and it usually doesn't take any more than a 5th or a 6th round pick. With all of the wide receiver movement that has gone on, remember that Calvin Ridley deal that everybody talked about, how the Jaguars fleeced Atlanta? I'm starting to think they didn't. One, because Ridley didn't sign here again. 2, Jaguar fans are glad that he didn't, because if he had, they wouldn't have Brian Thomas Jr. But 3, there's a lot of very productive dudes on the last year of their deal that are getting dealt for like fifth round picks, like the Devontae Adams of the world. And I know it's a little bit different because Adams is older and Ridley was a little bit younger. He wasn't that young. He was 29. But still, man, for me, it's just like, I'm thinking like they gave up a 3rd round pick to rent Calvin Ridley for a season. And this is for people that don't want to give up draft picks very much. Just add that into the plethora of things that kind of make you sour when you think about Trent Baalke. Speaking of Trent Baalke, I'm going to talk about what all of this means for him, the lack of movement, and if it means anything in particular. We'll talk about that and more as we move along here on Locked On Jaguars. Today's show is sponsored and brought to you by GameTime. If you want to go to an event and you ain't got your tickets, don't worry about it. Even if the event's already started, go right now. Download the GameTime app. You're going to get some tickets. You're going to get the lowest price guarantee, all of that stuff. And they got a curation process, man, that'll filter you through all the stuff and fluff you don't need, and you'll be able to get tickets. And you won't hear anybody tell you that coming at the last minute, like you remember that old thing they used to say, like your lack of preparation doesn't constitute an emergency on my part. Yeah, it does for GameTime because they love that. GameTime loves the fact that you come in there at the last minute because they love helping people that come in at the last minute. A lot of stuff going on at GameTime. You can take the guesswork out of buying tickets with GameTime picks. Download the GameTime app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download GameTime today. What time is it? It's game time. And today's show is sponsored and brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. You need to get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now new customers can bet $5, just $5, and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook the app gives you everything you need to place live bets on NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you make your bets. Not all of that flipping and trying to refresh and all of that stuff. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. All right, rolling along here on Locked On Jaguars, where it's your team every day. We thank you for making us your first listen. No movement from the Jacksonville Jaguars in terms of making trades to get some draft capital. The moves that they did make, I do know the Roy Robertson Harris. I think the Roy Robertson Harris deal is for a 2026 draft pick. It's not even for a draft pick this year. And I think they got a late round conditional draft pick for Cam Robinson. So all in all, the Jaguars haven't done much of anything except help a couple of teams that's trying to make playoff runs. And this is the thing. This kind of tells you where they know where they are, even if they didn't sell off parts, or if nobody called and they didn't get anything done, or they didn't get any offers. They're either stuck with the guys that they have that other people don't think are very good, or they're in a rock. They're between a rock and a hard place, because what they're saying is, okay, no, we ain't giving up. We ain't quitting. We ain't selling off pieces and parts. Everything that we gave up, we already had a replacement for. Okay, fine. But you also didn't go buy anything either. So that means to tell me that you're stuck between, you either a seller or a buyer, or you're a team that likes their team already. And a team that likes their team already that's 2-7 is somebody that shouldn't be liking their team. So either you're selling, you're buying, or you're saying, nope, we like what we have. And I got a problem with that. See, not doing nothing, sometimes not doing nothing, you're actually doing something when you think you're doing nothing. So by not doing anything, that seems to think, okay, this means the Jaguars feel that they're going to make a run, that they still got a shot, and this thing might turn around. Or it could possibly mean, and I ain't going to be unfair, it could mean that they didn't want to get fleeced by people that were calling them trying to get their people. They ain't never stopped them from getting fleeced before, but all of a sudden now they don't do anything this year. I think it's more about this, if you ask me. They're still trying to win games. They know deep down inside, if you watch football enough, this ain't 2022 all over again, where a magic wand is just going to come and get shaken, and all of a sudden these dudes just going to start playing lights out football. Like all of a sudden everybody's it's going to hit them overnight, and all of a sudden they're just going to start doing all the things that good football teams do, and they're going to be doing it not as healthy. Doesn't work like that. It does not work like that. And that will not happen. I'm not saying that they won't finish with 5, 6, maybe even 7 wins, but none of that is good enough considering the expectations that this team had when they came into the season. Just think about it. They made a move for Calvin Ridley a couple of years ago, and he wasn't even going to be playing that year. They did it for the future. Turns out that it backfired on them a little bit. They got okay production for a 3rd round pick, but they only got it for 1 year. And I don't want to hear about compensatory picks, because they signed a bunch of free agents last year, so they probably ain't going to get that either when it comes to him. So what's the deal? What does it mean that they didn't do anything? Well, it means that they didn't do anything. And I don't know why. Like I said, I don't know if they didn't receive calls. I don't know if they just guarded themselves against being fleeced, and good for them. Don't just do things just to do it. or somebody told them they couldn't do anything. Maybe that happened. I don't know. And we're not going to speculate here, but we're just going to point out the possible reasons why nothing happened. I'm going to lean towards what I've heard them say a lot. I think they like their roster. And I think that because they like their roster, that's like the worst sign in the world, because I like aspects of their team. I like certain people. I like certain parts, and I can justify some of the things that they've done and understand that some of the other things that they've done are just errors that everyone makes. Even the really good teams miss on players. But this is ridiculous. I'm not going to sit here and figure out a way to talk my way out of remembering that they're 2-7. And I'm not going to sit here and hope and pray and not try to shape or frame what I think might happen in the future for Jacksonville, and always have to give this precursor that, or this little statement that it doesn't matter what happens if Trent Baalke's making those picks. Even if I agree with you, we still have to let everything have its own identity. So please stop telling me that on social media to not talk about draft picks. If Trent is going to still make them, it does not matter. Because if that's the truth, then none of it matters. And I ain't going to stop doing podcasts because the Jaguars are incompetent. Because if that's the case, I would have stopped doing podcasts 15 years ago. The thing is for me, this doesn't signal that he's safe. No more than him trading those players before. There were people saying that this looks like a guy who's not afraid to lose his job. And I was like, well, I don't look like that to me. And him being still doesn't look like anything either. There could be a number of reasons why it happened. Cam Robinson didn't look sad, and Roy Robinson Harris probably ain't sad either, because they're both on teams that are pushing for wild cards in the NFC. Team needs moving ahead. Now that they didn't address anything else, they didn't get rid of anything else, it gives us a pretty clear picture of who they're going to have as they get to the offseason. What should they do? By they, I mean Trent Baalke or whoever else is in charge of this team. I'm going to assume for this exercise that the Jaguars have a top 5 pick. And I know I'm going to satisfy a whole bunch of people when I say a couple of the names that I'm going to say. I'll do that and more in just a second. Segment number 3 here on Locked On Jaguars. If you're going through it, man, and you're thinking about considering counseling, let me tell you something. In therapy, BetterHelp is the absolute place for that to happen. I'm telling you, man, BetterHelp is off the chain. They've helped me. I mean, with things that I never thought I needed help with. Death in the family, changing careers, not having time to spend with family. There's a lot of things, man, that you can be down about. Pain management, and then some sort of combination of all 3 of them. And then even when you get those things repaired, you got to learn how to get back on the bike. And that's where BetterHelp comes in. This month is all about gratitude, and along with the person I just and the people I just shouted out, there are other people we don't get to thank enough, and that's ourselves. And sometimes you just need somebody else to help you. And if you're thinking about starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. Just fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist, and switch therapists anytime for no additional charge. Let the gratitude flow with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/lockedon today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedon. Give BetterHelp a try. Third and final segment here on Locked On Jaguars. We're at your team every day. You can find me over on Locked On NFL too, man. I got another job. That's right. In the middle of the day, after Tyler Rowland comes on early in the morning, every single morning on Locked On NFL, and hit you with the double shot of espresso and the local experts that know your team better than anybody else. You can slide over with me in the middle of the day and check me out in the barbershop, and we do the same thing. 2 times a day on Locked On NFL. Make sure you check it out wherever you get your podcast, over on our Locked On NFL YouTube page, or wherever you listen or hear your podcast. All right. What would I do if I'm the Jaguars? I go into the offseason armed and dangerous at three positions. Three position groups, rather. You ready? Let's just say they got eight draft picks, 7 or 8 draft picks. They might have 9 by now. They traded those other picks away and they think they got an extra one. But if they have those picks in the draft, I'm going to vet those players really, really heavy, and I'm going best player available. I'm not trading back. I'm staying up top. Let's just assume it's a top 5 pick. Let's just say it's number 5, right? You're not going to you ain't drafting no quarterback. You better not. You ain't getting Travis Hunter. That's not going to happen. What could the Jaguars do? Is there a Joe Alt there? I don't think there's anybody ranked that high, but they might not be able to get to it. Let me tell you why. Because free agency comes before the draft. And one of the people that I've been watching, and I don't think he's got a contract extension, at least he hadn't as of last week. Now, I know people are going to trip because this dude is 32 years old, but he's 32 years old. He's relatively healthy, and he has not spent, and you haven't seen a whole bunch of slide in his play. And I'm not even knowing if he's going to be available because this team might slap that franchise tag on him. But Garrett Bowles, the left tackle for the Denver Broncos, is set to become a free agent. I'd do it. I wouldn't even be waiting on no rookie to develop. Unless you're thinking about, depending on what Walker Little shows you, and I saw him the other day, and while he wasn't terrible, he still gets beat too much and too easily by guys that I consider elite. And I'm thinking about them winning the championship. I'm not trying to have the Jaguars constantly keep committing to people that are just okay guys to get you by. Because once you commit to an okay guy to just get you by for a while, what ends up happening is you get stuck with that person, and upgrading him doesn't become as much of a priority because you might have a glaring need at another position. But I'll tell you this, there's nothing more important than protecting Trevor Lawrence. In case y'all didn't know that. I mean, it should have been the prevalent thought for a long time, but they've been playing scout with the offensive line so much it gets on my nerves. This ain't the time to show how good of a scout you are when it comes time to protect your quarterback. You better fortify that offensive line with as much intent as you can. Jump out in front of it. Overdo it. But they haven't. That philosophy needs to change. They need a left tackle. And the only reason I said to go get Bowles is because I want them to draft 2 more offensive linemen. I really want them to get Trey Smith because I know the Chiefs ain't going to be able to get it. He's going to be a free agent. That's who I really would go after at right guard, but I don't think they're going to do it because it's going to cost them $100 million. He's a good player too, but can you imagine if they got Trey Smith on a 5-year deal and then turned around and said, okay, Garrett Bowles, here's a 3-year, nice little 3-year deal. Maybe add a little 4th year just to ride it out and stretch things out. So now you got a left tackle and you got one of the most elite right guards in the league playing next to Anton Harrison, and you still have Mitch Morse for another year. Then you could just look into the draft. I might go in the 2nd round and get Tyler Booker from Alabama. And now you fortified your front and there's no excuses. And I still haven't talked about what I do with my 1st round pick. You ain't going to get Travis Hunter, but you might get William Johnson. Y'all hear me? You might get William Johnson. And if William Johnson is gone, I would go ahead and look at Mason Graham. And I know that makes somebody out there extremely happy, but he is a very, very disruptive player who can play the 3 technique. He can 2 gap. He can do all of that stuff, but he provides that 6'3", 339 pounds and provides a whole bunch of activity on the interior of the defensive line. You got to get a playmaker, man. You got to draft the dude that's going to be one of the best players in the league at his position. Something else I'm interested in the Jaguars doing, and I don't know if they're going to do it, but it depends on who the player is. The Jaguars need another wide receiver. another young wide receiver to grow and groom that's 1 year separated from Brian Thomas Jr. Now, the only problem with that is if you take one in the second or third round, he's going to need money at the same time Brian Thomas Jr. will need money, because with Brian Thomas Jr., you have a 5th-year option. Unless you do the smart thing and re-up him early. But that means if this other guy is just as good, now they're coming into the money around the same time, because even though he's a year behind Brian Thomas, if you get a guy and he's not a first-round pick, they'll need money. Their money will be coming up about the same time, especially if he's a second-round pick. But there's still a way around that. But there are some very, very good players. There's some good players. And this guy can be complimentary. This dude doesn't even have to be a superstar. He just has to be a complimentary player, got to be a really, really good route runner. I'm going to give you my guys, Tate Felton, who I really, really like. I like his route running ability. I like his tape. He's 6'2", about 185 pounds. Probably needs to put on a little bit. It kind of reminds you of Devontae Smith a little bit, but reminds you a lot of those Green Bay Packer wide receivers. Those guys that just seem like they're always open in the middle of the field. They always find a way to shake free. They catch everything in sight, and Tate Felton is my dude. So I'm giving you a plan here. Now, it doesn't mean the Jaguars are going to all of a sudden jump up and be really, really good in one season. And it doesn't mean that they're going to be like the Washington Commanders, who are one of the top 7 or top 8 teams in the league after being one of the worst run organizations in football for the last 2 decades in just one off season. But there's a way to do this correctly. And if you notice what I'm doing, I'm paying attention to the trenches, and I'm not just plugging it in. I'm not cherry picking. I'm major overhaul in the offensive line. I'm adding an instant playmaker to that defense. And then I'm touching up that wide receiver core again. Yeah, I'm doing it again. I don't care. I might add 2 wide receivers. If the Packers can find dudes, they find 3 guys in one draft. The Jaguars have found 1 guy you can add Parker Washington in there too. But I would get another, not necessarily huge bodied guy, but he wouldn't be a small guy either. But it'd be a wide receiver like the one I just mentioned, 6'1", 6'2", 190, a route runner. I go get Keenan McCardell to complement our new Jimmy Smith, and that's Brian Thomas Jr. But it's got to be the trenches, and it's got to be the defensive backs. You got to be able to cover on the back end aggressively. They can attack the veteran safety market. I don't know why they didn't do it this year. They tried to do it with Tayshaun Gibson, and look, they ain't have to give him that much money, but he's gone already. Never got off the commissioner's list or whatever it was, the suspended list. But it just does make you wonder, like, when you see this team, they committed to Ronald Darby, and people warned me, and I said, well, I'm going to give it a try. Doug knows him, whatever. Then you wonder why they didn't go after Stephon Gilmore and Justin Simmons, and why were they bringing in all that? Because guys are too busy trying to show how nice they are with their scouting. The biggest thing they need is new leadership. New GM, new leadership. Those are the things that I'm telling you the Jaguars need. But they need somebody who's going to build this thing the right way from the inside out. And I hope they understand that Trent Baalke is not that guy. I know some people say he almost said Shot's not that guy. Yeah, I ain't say that. He's the owner of the team. All right, man. Make sure y'all check back tomorrow. Midweek stuff on Wednesday. We'll do like we always do on Hump Day. May do even a Wednesday mailbag for you. And then Thursday, of course, we have our Thursday crossover. That will be with Luke Braun from Locked On Vikings. And then, of course, our Friday preview, last day preview, will get you ready for the game on Sunday. And, of course, the postcast coming up on Sunday. Make sure you check me out wherever you get your podcast, Locked On Jaguars. We appreciate you joining us. Take care of each other. We'll do the same.